Hi everybody. Well, this vehicle is a 1998 Jeep Cherokee XJ, and today I'm going to do a fuel pressure test. So I'm actually going to be doing this in two different steps. First, I'm going to do it with the engine off and the key on, jumpering out the relay contacts to force the fuel pump to run during the test. And then secondly, I'm going to start the engine and let it run while monitoring fuel pressure on this gauge. So let's get started. So the first thing I have to do is open up this plastic cap on the fuel rail, and then I can get access to the test port and Schrader valve. I also want to check inside the cap itself. If you see down there, there's a little O-ring, and you got to make sure that that's in good condition because that helps to seal the service port for the fuel rail. So it's kind of easy. Just have to take the threaded end of the fuel pressure gauge connector and just tighten it onto the test port. Just make sure you don't crank down too tight, but just make it snug. And then that's pretty much it. Now I just have to activate the fuel pump and see what happens on the gauge. This is the under hood fuse box. On the top left is the fuel pump relay, which I've already removed. This is a typical 5-contact relay. Pin 30, which is that blade here in the middle, and pin 87, which is this bottom flat blade. Those are the two contacts that I need to jumper on the relay socket to make the fuel pump turn on. So if I just look at the way that these contacts go in, it's going to be this top connector and this bottom one. So to do that, I'm just going to use a piece of solid copper wire and carefully insert it into the one connector here on the bottom, and then take the other side and connect it into this connector at the top. And you can hear the fuel pump turn on. So it looks like we're able to build 44 PSI of fuel pressure in this vehicle without the engine running. So now I'm going to turn the fuel pump off. And now we'll give it a minute and see what happens to the fuel pressure. And what I'm looking for is how much the fuel pressure drops over time. If it drops just a little bit, that's okay. But if it drops really far, really fast, say 20 PSI in about 30 seconds, then we know there's a problem with fuel draining back into the tank. But say if there's only a small loss, maybe 1 or 2, maybe 4 PSI over the period of a minute or so, then we're okay. Okay, so now it's been about 2 minutes and we've only dropped down to about 38 PSI. So that's pretty good. 3 or 4 PSI over the course of a couple minutes is really nothing to be concerned about. Really what I was looking for was a large drop in a short period of time, indicating that the check valve inside the fuel pump may be bad and letting the fuel pressure drain off right away when the pump is turned off. But since it's only a very, very slow and a small loss in pressure over a couple minutes, that's really nothing to worry about. So now we can get ready for our engine running test. Put the relay back in. And I'll clear the gauge. And now that everything's out of the way, it's safe to start the engine and watch the fuel pressure gauge. Oh, look at that. Shot right up. Oh yeah. That's quite a bit of fluttering. But just to make sure it's not an air problem, I'm going to go ahead and bleed some fuel through the line, through the gauge set and out the bleeder tube into my bottle, just to make sure the fluttering is not caused by air trapped in the hose. There we go. That's much better. So it looks like that large fluctuation was caused by air trapped in the hose. So you see the needle is fluctuating a little bit, and that fluctuation is being caused by the injectors. So you have the fuel pump that's building 49 psi, but every time one of the 6 injectors opens up and then closes again, you see an immediate drop and then rise in fuel pressure. So this slight fluttering of the needle is showing you that drop and then rise in pressure after each injector opens and closes. It's actually pretty cool. So it looks like we're in good shape. The book says we should have 49 psi plus or minus 5. And since this needle is fluctuating between 46 and 48, I'd say we're okay. There's one more test we can do with this setup, and that's a volume flow test. And so I have the bleeder hose feeding into an old bottle, and all I have to do is press the bleeder valve and watch the fuel flow through the hose, through the gauge, out of the bleeder tube, and into the bottle. Pretty cool. So once again, we'll watch the gauge and see how pressure drops over time. Okay, so it's been a minute, and I've only seen about a half a psi drop. So that's pretty good. And now just to finish up, I'm going to bleed the pressure off in the gauge. And disconnect the hose. And most importantly, reinstall the sealing cap. And there you have it. Fuel pressure test on a 98 Jeep Cherokee XJ. Pretty cool. Well, if you have any questions or any comments, post them below. And thanks for watching. And if you like my videos, please subscribe.